evening, everyone, and welcome to Cucamonga Valley Medical Group's Healthy Living webinar. My name is Sabrina, and I'm a community health educator. Remember that tonight's webinar is interactive, so please feel free to communicate with me through the chat and ask any questions through the Q&A. I also saved some time for the Q&A at the end. Tonight's Healthy Living topic is creating a powerful self-care routine. And before we discuss how to create a self-care routine, we first need to talk about what is self-care. Well, self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health and well-being. So an important part of this definition is taking action. So for self-care, you first make a choice to practice self-care, and then you take action. So self-care activities are the things you do to maintain good health and well-being. Many of the activities you are already doing can be considered self-care. So things like flossing your teeth, reading a book, going on a walk, those are all self-care activities. I want you to remember that the more intentional you are about self-care, the better you become at self-care and the easier it is and the more natural it becomes for you. You can also take your self-care up a notch by learning more about self-care and planning for your self-care, which is what we will be doing in this webinar. So first, we're going to be talking about the benefits of self-care. So why should we care about self-care? What are the benefits to it? The different types of self-care and self-care activities. Planning for self-care. So how can you plan your self-care routine? And we're going to learn something called the self-care assessment. And then at the end, I'm going to share effective self-care practices that have been well researched. Regularly doing self-care has been linked to a ton of positive health outcomes. So number one is that reduce stress. So when you regularly practice self-care, you feel less stress, which is great, right? We always want to feel less stress. Increase productivity, so you're more productive. Improved immune system, which we know is very important, especially in today's time. We want to do everything we can to keep our immune system up. And a higher self-esteem, increased motivation, and happiness and satisfaction. So a ton of great benefits when you regularly practice self-care. Have you ever felt guilty for taking some time for yourself? Well, that's a common feeling, especially when you have kids, you have other responsibilities, right? Work, career. And some people perceive self-care as being selfish or self-indulgent. However, the opposite is true. When we are regularly taking care of ourselves, we are better at doing our other responsibilities, such as work and family life. As the saying goes, you must first put on your air mask before assisting others. I like to think of this as a teapot example. So you are a teapot, right? And in front of you, you have your teacups. And your teacups is all the areas in your life where you put your energy and effort into. Maybe it's kids, your marriage, your career, right? Well, if you do not take the time to fill up your own teapot, you're not going to have any tea to pour into your teacups. So practicing self-care is not selfish. It is actually responsible, and it makes us better people. Self-care can take many forms, and it can mean a lot of different things for different people. There are actually 5 important types of self-care that we're going to discuss tonight. So first is going to be physical self-care. And physical self-care are the activities that you do to improve your physical health. Sometimes this category of self-care is referred to the basics of self-care because it includes things like cooking healthy meals, exercise, resting, going to your preventative medical appointments, drinking plenty of water. So you are taking care of yourself physically. Physical self-care is the foundation to all self-care. right? If we are not taking care of ourselves physically, it's going to be harder on ourselves to achieve the other self-care, right? So we need to be taking care of ourselves physically to get the most out of all the other areas of life. How are you currently practicing physical self-care? What are you doing for your physical self-care? The second type of self-care is emotional self-care. And emotional self-care are the activities that help you connect, reflect, and process your emotions in a healthy way. When we practice emotional self-care, we are better able to handle difficult feelings when they come up. So emotional self-care has been proven to be very important. And emotional self-care activities is going to be number one, is expressing your feelings through creativity. So do an activity where you use your creativity. Maybe it's creating art, journaling, singing, playing an instrument, photography, graphic design. The list is endless. There's many options that you can do to express your creativity. The trick is just to find something that you enjoy. Number two is to participate in hobbies. Everyone needs a good hobby, and when we participate in hobbies, we are able to put our emotions and process our emotions in a healthy way. So maybe it's gardening, woodworking, scrapbooking, whatever it may be for you. So participating in hobbies is a way. And a very important part of emotional self-care is talking about your feelings and problems. This is a very important part of emotional self-care. So find someone in your life who you trust that you can talk to about your problems and feelings. And if you currently don't have anyone in your life that you can talk to, I recommend to go seek someone out. There's a lot of support out there. You can join a support group, talk to a professional. So it's very important to talk about your feelings and your problems. And lastly is taking time off and taking breaks, which is a great way to stay emotionally healthy. When we are on a go, go, go all the time and we don't allow ourselves a break, that really can make us feel emotionally unhealthy and lead to us acting in unhealthy behaviors. So take some time off, take some breaks. That's a very important way to practice self-care. So our next type of self-care is social self-care. And social self-care are the activities that nurture our relationships with others. So humans are social beings and we thrive on interaction with people. So even you introverts, so everyone needs interaction with others. The problem is oftentimes our life gets busy and we cancel our plans with our friends or our family. However, it is very important to make time for social interaction. Just think about how good you feel after a good heart-to-heart with someone close to you. So social self-care activities are going to be things like spending time with loved ones, going out to dinner with friends, a romantic date, meeting new people. So those are all ways that you can practice social self-care. Our fourth type of self-care is spiritual self-care. And that is where you do activities that nurtures your spirit and allows you to think bigger than yourself. Spiritual self-care does not always have to mean religious, even though for some it is. It can also include things like spending time in nature, meditation, prayer, acts of kindness, doing a gratitude journal. So those are all ways that you can practice spiritual self-care. Our last type of self-care is mental self-care, and that is any activity that stimulates your mind and your intellect. So learning something new, reading a book, listening to a podcast, games, puzzles, museums, whatever it may be, that's going to be mental self-care when you are doing an activity to stimulate your mind and your intellect. So to review all the types of self-care we discussed, first we have our physical self-care, which remember is the foundation to all self-care. And then we have emotional, social, spiritual, and mental self-care. These 5 types of self-care are very effective in improving health and well-being. Well, how can you get started with a self-care routine? Well, first, you have to learn about your self-care needs. And it's important to remember that not the same self-care is going to be for everyone, right? What is self-care for one person will likely differ for someone else. And an important part is that what might be self-care for you today could change tomorrow, right? So your self-care needs are always changing. That's why it's important to regularly do a self-care assessment. And that's where you ask yourself, how are you doing? What do I need, right? So this is the first step to self-care. And for the self-care assessment, I highly recommend you write this down, get a piece of paper and a pen out. And you're first going to ask yourself, how am I doing? What am I needing? So this is when we first ask ourselves, we identify our needs. Maybe, I haven't been very physically active lately. I've been feeling lonely. I want to feel less lonely. I've been feeling really stressed. Or maybe I've been feeling bored. I want to feel more engaged. So this is where you do some self-reflection and you think about how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are you needing? So once you have the answers to that, then you'll ask yourself, what do you hope to achieve from your self-care? What's your goal from your self-care? Maybe you want to be a calmer person. Maybe you want to be more focused. Maybe you want to feel better, happier. Maybe you want to be more physically healthy. So what do you hope to achieve from your self-care? And then after that, you would ask yourself, what type of self-care do I want to work on and why? So out of those 5 types of self-care we discussed, such as physical, emotional, social, spiritual, mental, what type of self-care are you most want to work on and why? And then after you have the answers to all those questions, go ahead and figure out what activities will you enjoy. That's an important part of self-care, is that you want to do something that you enjoy. If you are doing something you don't enjoy, it's really not going to feel like self-care. So go ahead and reflect on your answers for the rest of the assessment and then pick some activities that you enjoy and will address all of the things that you would want to achieve and that you need. So maybe you want to start being creative, doing a creative activity Monday night. And maybe Tuesday mornings you're going to be getting outside, getting some nature time. So pick some activities that you enjoy after doing this self-care assessment. And then pick 1 or 2 and just put it on your to-do list that week. That's a great way to get started, is just picking 1 or 2 and putting it on your to-do list and giving it a try and see how it goes from there. My biggest tip about self-care is to keep your self-care activities simple. If you make your self-care activities stressful and complicated, that's going to be counterproductive, right? So keep your self-care activities simple. This could mean spending a few minutes a day not doing nothing, right? Just sitting, relaxing, breathing, no social media, no nothing, just sitting and relaxing a few minutes a day. That's going to be a great, effective way to practice self-care. You could go to bed early, read a book, go on a walk, take a relaxing bath, listen to some music. So those are all simple and effective ways to practice self-care. A big self-care activity would be maybe a weekend getaway. That's a big self-care activity, which is nice to do once in a while. But just remember that engaging in those simple self-care activities is really where we get those benefits, right? We are regularly practicing simple self-care. We are feeling good. We are taking care of ourselves. And that is going to be where we're going to get all those benefits that we talked about earlier. Remember, if you are busy, and I know many of us are, you can take a few minutes a day to practice self-care. Doing a little self-care is always better than doing no self-care. So just go ahead and if you are busy, take a few minutes a day, do an activity that's for you, where you can practice self-care. And so that's my biggest tip, is to keep it simple. So I wanted to share with you that there is 5 self-care practices that have been well researched, and they've been linked to a happier, healthier well-being. And I wanted to share them with you so you have all of this information as well. So number 1 is going to be exercise. Exercise has been proven to be an effective self-care activity. Fiber-rich foods, so eating foods rich in fiber, such as fruits, legumes, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. That's going to be an effective way to practice self-care. Sleep. Sleep is huge. If we have a good sleep routine, that's a great way to practice self-care. Sometimes we put self-care on the back burner, and that can be counterproductive to our health goals. So making sure we are getting enough sleep, a good 7 to 8 hours, is going to be a great way to practice effective self-care. And then getting outside. Getting outside is a great way to practice self-care. You can practice all types of self-care when you get outside, physical, spiritual, emotional. So getting outside is a great way, it's an effective way to practice self-care. And finding purpose. So finding purpose is another self-care effective practice that can really lead to healthier and happier well-being. I would like to announce that May is National Healthy Vision Month, and that one of our wonderful providers at Cucamonga Valley Medical Group, Dr. Becca Meyer, she would like to remind all our patients about the importance of an annual eye check. And that's because most of the leading causes of blindness in the U.S. are preventable with early detection and intervention. So talk to your healthcare provider about what screening is appropriate for you annually. So we'll take some time to do a Q&A. And I do have one question already in our Q&A box, which says, how do I have any recommendations on how to do all of the types of self-care? So do you have any recommendations on how to do all of the types of self-care? That's a great question. And you know what? One method that I have found to be very effective is to dedicate each day a week to the different types of self-care. So maybe Monday can be all about eating well. So maybe meal prepping, getting your nutrition set for the week. Tuesday could be using your creativity. So having an activity plan, something where you can use your creativity. Wednesday could be about relaxing. Thursday could be about getting outside. Friday could be about social, so some social self-care. So that's a great method to use when talking about self-care and trying to do all the different types of self-care. Looks like we don't have any more questions for this evening. So remember, we talked about the benefits of self-care, all the different types of self-care and self-care activities. We learned how to create our own self-care routine by doing a self-care assessment. And we learned about the effective self-care practices that have been proven to help with healthy living and happier well-being. Well, that is all I have for you tonight. Next month's Healthy Living webinar is about men's health. So I hope for you to join me next month. Thank you so much for joining and your participation tonight. I hope to see you next month. Have a great evening and thank you so much.